Pauline, and we are your hosts for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight is all about how pivotal moments in our life can actually help us figure out our faith rather than leave it behind.
So just want to say thanks for joining us, whether that's through Facebook or over on the YouTube channel. Give us a like, that way you're up to date and you subscribe to the content that we put out.
Yeah, so Beyond is all about creating a church that unchurched people want to attend. So whether this is your first time watching us, whether you've gone to church your whole life, or whether you're somewhere in the middle, we're just so happy to have you here.
So sit back, relax, get comfy, because when you see us again, we've got some exciting news of what's happening at Beyond.
See you then.
Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a really challenging circumstance? Chances are, if you're not in the middle of one right now, you're about to head into one, or you're just coming out of one. In today's episode of Beyond at Home, we're going to talk about one thing that you can do to ensure that even your most challenging circumstances are something that you can use to help you figure faith out instead of leaving your faith behind. So grab your snacks, let's go. And if you're new here at Beyond, firstly, welcome. My name's Chris and I'm just part of the team here at Beyond. And if you are new and you're on Facebook, I'd encourage you to like the page, or if you're over on YouTube, subscribe so you can stay up to date on everything that we've been talking about throughout this series. Man, this curly welly is super chilly. But if you're new here, we're wrapping up a series called Figuring Faith Out. And this is a series, whether you've been a Jesus follower your whole life, whether you're brand new to faith, that we hope will be helpful for you as you continue to figure this thing called faith out in your own life. And we've been looking at these things called the 5 faith catalysts, and they all begin with P because that's what preachers like me do. We like to label things with the same letter and have alliteration. And so throughout this series, we looked at practical teaching. We had a bonus episode of the Beyond the Message podcast. We looked at providential relationships. We looked at private disciplines. Last week, Riley looked at personal ministry. And today, we're looking at pivotal circumstances. Right now, we're in the middle of what I would say is a pivotal circumstance for a lot of people. It's pivotal because maybe you've lost your job, or you've had to reconfigure your finances, or you're in the middle of figuring out family dynamics when you're all locked in the house and you're not allowed to go outside for a lot of time. For a lot of us, this moment that we're going through right now isn't the first pivotal circumstance that we've experienced in our lives. And some of you are probably like, what do you mean the first pivotal circumstance? I don't even know what pivotal circumstance is. Well, a pivotal circumstance is really just a defining moment in your life. And our defining moments all look different in our lives. They don't just have to be negative. Some of them can be positive. Why? Because it's your defining moment. And your defining moments in your life might look very different from the defining moments in my life. Perhaps for you, it was when you started that new job, or went to that new school, or transitioned to that new university, or maybe for you, it was when you got married or got divorced. Maybe for you, it was when you got pregnant, or you were really struggling to get pregnant, or you got pregnant unexpectedly. Maybe for others of you, it was when you got that job, or you actually lost that job. When you got that diagnosis that you never thought you were ever going to get, or you lost a parent. And something I hear over and over again in people's faith journey is that in these defining moments of their lives, that God did something. Maybe it was that God caused them to trust him more. Maybe it was for the very first time that they began to pray. Maybe God used it to get them to join a group or to give financially for the very first time. And if you're new to our Facebook or to our YouTube channel, one of the things you might be thinking of as I begin to talk about the way that God uses our defining moments is you're thinking to yourself, but Chris, you're just making excuses for God. Like if God was really all loving and all caring, why would he allow bad things to happen in the first place? What you're doing by talking about these defining moments or these pivotal circumstances, whatever you want to call them, you're just making an excuse for God, aren't you? And if that's you, I can understand why you might feel that way. But something that you might not know about Christianity and Jesus followers is that we believe that there is an undeniable link between the pivotal, bad, challenging circumstances of our life and what God wants to do within our faith. And maybe for you, the reason that you resist it is because you believe, or you've been told that, well, if you just follow Jesus, life will be fine. If you just trust in God, that life will be fine. And if that's what you've been led to believe, I'm really sorry. But that is not what Christianity is all about. In fact, at the center of Christianity is not a set of rules, but a person. And that person's name is Jesus. And Jesus died a horrifically violent death at the hands of the Roman Empire, where he was brutally beaten and hung to crucify on a cross. so that you and I could have a relationship with God and begin to figure faith out for ourselves. See, if anything, at the heart of Christianity, it shows us how the most challenging circumstances and situations in our lives can be used by God to not leave us feeling hopeless, but leave us feeling hope-filled. In fact, James, who was the brother of Jesus, which I just think is crazy, that the brother of Jesus didn't want to have anything to do with Jesus while he was alive, went on to become what people would call a pillar of the Jesus movement. James actually wrote a letter that was couriered around to churches all around the Mediterranean after they'd run away from Jerusalem, after a guy called Stephen became the very first Christian who was killed for his belief that Jesus was who he claimed to be. James writes this about our pivotal circumstances. He says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." And you're probably thinking, sorry, James, what do you want us to do? You want us to consider it pure joy when we face trials. And then he goes on and he lets us know why that should be our approach. He says, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Yeah, you read that correctly. James says that there will be times when our faith is tested. And in that testing, what actually happens is that it produces something. And that something is perseverance, which means that God is up to something in the defining moments of your life. James finishes his thought this way. He says, perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. James is saying it's no accident that Jesus followers and non-Jesus followers all face these pivotal circumstances within our lives, which at times can feel overwhelming and daunting and like we're never going to be able to make our way through them. But in the midst of these circumstances, God's up to something, and God wants to do something to help you figure faith out and lead you to a point in your faith journey. And in case you're a visual learner and you're trying to figure out what that would look like, let me show you. It says, James is saying that God uses a trial, then a test of faith to develop perseverance, which leads to stronger faith. I promised you at the start of this video that I would give you one practical thing that you can do to ensure that your pivotal circumstances and defining moments actually lead you closer to God and actually help you figure faith out. And we actually find out what that practical thing is in a moment that happened in the life of Jesus that is recorded by his best friend, John. In this interaction that John records, Jesus doesn't just respond to a pivotal circumstance, he actually goes out of his way to create a pivotal circumstance. Check this out. A man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick. So John's kind of like saying, hey, in the future, I'm going to talk about this Mary. Just remember, it's the same Mary. And he says, so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. In other words, Jesus, we know all the healing you do for people that you don't know, people that you're not familiar with, but someone who you know, who you care about deeply, needs you right now. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it will happen for the glory of God so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. At this point, the people around Jesus are probably hearing this confused, like, well, of course, if you do something about it, Jesus, Lazarus won't die. And of course, it'll result in you getting glory because nobody else can do the things that you do. But then Jesus does something that nobody expected him to do. So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. And no one, not even John, understood why Jesus did this until finally, because 2 days would have felt like an eternity to the group who knew that with every passing second, Lazarus was creeping closer and closer to death. Finally, he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. Because Bethany, the town Lazarus lived in, is really close to Judea. In fact, you had to pass through it to get to Bethany. But his disciples objected. Rabbi, they said, only a few days ago, the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going to go there again? Now, this is a sidebar, but comments like this kind of make me want to lean in and trust that the documents that John wrote are true. Because if you were trying to make up a story where you were trying to create a new religion, you would paint yourself to be the hero. But over and over and over again in the biographies we have of Jesus' life, those closest to him don't paint themselves as a hero. In fact, they paint themselves as people who doubted or who weren't sure. Anyway, Jesus uses that cowardice to insert this little mini teaching, but once he's done with that, he says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I'm going to go and wake him up. Now remember, the disciples were already afraid of going back to Judea, so their response is like, well, if Lazarus is sleeping, like he'll get better soon. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant that he had died. And then he says this to them. He told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Nobody knows how Jesus knows this, but hey, it's Jesus, right? And if you thought Jesus staying there for 2 days and not immediately rushing to Lazarus' side was odd, then this next statement is even more. He says, and for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. Now this is odd because straight away my mind thinks automatically like, Jesus, for their sakes. What about for Mary's sake? What about for Martha's sake? What about for Lazarus' sake? Then Jesus lets us in on why he's glad he wasn't there. For your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. For now, you can really believe. Let's go see him. And if you've been a Jesus follower for a while, you might nod your head and be like, yeah, I know that, Chris, I get it, but I want you to just pause for a moment and soak this in. And if you're not a Jesus follower, this might be a reason just simply for you to put on hold following Jesus for a little bit longer. Because what Jesus was telling everyone in God's economy, belief is more important than being healed. Belief is more important than pain and suffering and death and hurt. All the people around him who would have said, Jesus, would you allow Lazarus to die simply to help Mary and Martha figure faith out? And Jesus would have said yes. And this might be the moment things get uncomfortable for you, particularly if you've ever said things like, I can't believe in a God who will allow bad things to happen. Because if that's you, I want you to know that's not the God of the Bible. It's not the God Jesus' followers believe in. But Jesus would say that while he isn't the cause of evil, he works in and he uses defining moments to help you build your faith in light of eternity. We skip ahead to Jesus nearly arriving at Lazarus' place. And when Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him. But Mary stayed in the house. Like, understandably, Mary's upset. She's frustrated. Jesus, if you would have been here, if you could have done something, it would have been different. And Martha says to Jesus, actually, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would have not died. Jesus, if only you had been here, but you chose not to. You chose to wait for 2 days. And yet in the midst of her outrage, Martha says this, but even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask. In other words, despite how mad I am at you, I can't deny what I see when I look at you and spend time with you. That even though you didn't answer my prayer, I know that you're God. And finally, Jesus speaks. Jesus told her, your brother will rise again. And Martha thought Jesus was giving her like a theology lesson, like a lesson about God. And she responds, yeah, I know that, Jesus. I'm a Jew and you're a Jew and we all know about that kind of stuff. But Jesus knows that Martha doesn't really quite understand what he's driving at. And Jesus tells her, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who believes in me and lives in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha? Now, this is a huge statement. Jesus has essentially said that anyone who trusts in him will live eternally after they die. That's it. Just trust me and you'll live eternally. Now, you can't make a statement like that without backing it up. So Jesus sets out towards Lazarus' tomb. And as Jesus gets to the tomb, he's standing outside. John writes down what happened. It's the shortest verse in the entire collection of documents we call the Bible. It simply says, Jesus wept. This moment is so powerful because in this moment, we see the tension that Jesus is living out and the tension that we live in on a daily basis. See, on the one hand, Jesus knows exactly what he's about to do, that he is the resurrection and the life. Yet on the other hand, there's a whole lot of hurt and pain in the world still. And he pauses a moment to feel what Mary and Martha are feeling in that moment, and it causes him to break down. In this moment, he feels perhaps what you're feeling or you felt when you didn't think God was going to come through for you, or when things didn't turn out the way that you'd hoped they would. And everyone around watching him notices the way he breaks down. And they say, the people standing there nearby said, see how much he loved him. And maybe some of you watching this right now, you need to know that just because you're going through a pivotal circumstance, just because you're in the midst of a defining moment, doesn't mean that God doesn't love you. Just because you feel like God isn't moving doesn't mean that he doesn't love you, because it's not what it meant for Lazarus. But Jesus looks up through his tears and asks some people to move the stone that would have been in front of Lazarus' tomb. And as they're moving up into heaven, he prays this really weird prayer, which essentially he just kind of says, God, I know that I don't need to pray to you, but I'm going to pray to you because I need to demonstrate to everyone around me that what I'm about to do is because you and I have a relationship. Does everyone around me see? Okay, good. Let me get to it. And Jesus walks up to the grave and he says, Lazarus, come out. And John records what happened when people saw this. Many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw what happened. And here's where this applies to us and what we can take away from this in our own lives. Because we've all had stories where people who have encountered a pivotal circumstance in their lives, and as a result, they decided they couldn't trust God and that God couldn't be trusted. And so what happened is that they turned their backs on God. Now, here's why that happens. Because if it feels like God is doing something to us, that's when we lose our faith. People who lose trust in God because of pivotal circumstances, if you listen to their story, they will always get to a point where they'll say, and then God did, or God allowed, or God went right ahead and let. But people who don't lose faith, people who actually use their pivotal circumstances to help them figure faith out, are people who realize that in the midst of everything that is going on, God is doing something in them. They're the people who come out the other side and they say things like, well, God showed me my pride. God showed me my lack of humility. God showed me areas of my life that I was holding on to instead of allowing him to direct. And I want so badly for you so that you can see what God is doing in your pivotal circumstances. And so the Form Monday, as we wrap this series up, is simply this: to ask God to show his hand in your circumstances. Because if we're honest, we've all been at times, and I've had times in my faith journey that it felt like God was doing something to me. And it caused me to wonder if following Jesus was all it was cracked up to be. That's probably not something that you want to hear from a dude talking about Jesus, but that's just the truth. And you've probably been in that situation too, where it felt like God was doing something to you. But in those moments, what has changed for me is when I've started to pray, or maybe actually yell at God a little bit and ask, where are you in this circumstance? Show me what you're trying to teach me in this circumstance. And maybe for you, you want to be so bold as to actually comment in the comments below on Facebook or YouTube, show me. And if that's you, and if you want to do that below, what I'll be doing over the next couple of weeks is I'll be coming back and I'll be revisiting this video. And every single person who comments, show me, I'll be praying for you personally. Not because my prayers are anything special or they're more special, but simply because as you're praying for God to show you what he's doing in you, I want you to know that I'm praying for you and that Beyond is praying for you as well. So my prayer for you and my hope for you is that as you leave this series, that you would begin to see what God is doing in you in the midst of your defining moments and your pivotal circumstances. And I'd love to pray for you really quickly. Jesus, would you show us what you're doing in us in these difficult times? That we would actually draw closer to you instead of falling away. And we pray these things in your name. Amen.
Hey guys, as I said earlier, we've got some exciting news to share. We're going to be celebrating Beyond's 5th birthday.
Can you believe it? 5 years of Beyond.
Nice.
So we'd just like to invite you along next week. We're going to have some Zoom after party hangs. So if you're not already connected in with the Connect group, now's a great time to send us a message because we're going to be celebrating all week long.
So thanks for joining us on the Figuring Faith Out series. If someone's name came to mind, why not consider sharing and helping them on their faith journey?
So as we wrap up, we're just going to send this to the band. We're going to have 2 more songs, but we really hope to see you again next week.
Woo! Yeah! I love that one too. That was perfect.
Hey guys, we're going to sing Only Wanna Sing. This is no performance, Lord, I pray it's worship. Empty words I can't afford. I'm not chasing feelings, that's not why I'm singing. You're the reason for my song. I only wanna sing if I sing with everything. If I sing for you, my King. I can't imagine why I would do this all for hype. 'Cause it's all to lift you high. Don't want perfection, just my soul's attention. All I have is what I'll give. More than a song that lasts some moment, I live a life of honest worship. If I need to sing, then I'll sing with purpose. All the praise, Lord, you deserve it now. I only wanna sing if I sing with everything. If I sing for you, my King. I can't imagine why I would do this all for hype. 'Cause it's all to lift you high. I only wanna sing if I sing with everything. If I sing for you, my King. I can't imagine why I would do this all for hype. 'Cause it's all to lift you high.
This is Every Little Thing by Hillsong Young and Free. Your favor waits within the future. My dreams are small compared to yours. Why should I worry about tomorrow when I know that all I've gotta do is trust you, Lord? 'Cause every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you will work it out for good. 'Cause every little thing, everything will be alright. Behind the scenes and in the details, you plan the perfect way for me. Why would I dwell upon the road's uncertainty? gotta do is up to you. 'Cause every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you will work it out for good. 'Cause every little thing, everything will be alright. Every little thing, every little